Here's a typical classroom situation. The learners have done an exercise and then the teacher gets feedback on this. So the teacher asks, did she go out? And learner 1 says, yes. Yes, good. What time did she go out? 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Yes, good. How often does she go out? Every Friday. Every Friday. Yes, good. Where does she go? The cinema. The cinema. Yes, good. I think this is a really common scenario in classrooms, but I think there are some issues with it. My name's Jo Kakonga and this is a video for elttraining.com. This time we're looking at giving feedback on activities and how you can make it more varied and maybe more useful. So what kind of problems do we have with this? The first one is this. The learner gives an answer and the teacher repeats it. Teacher echo we've talked about in another video, so I don't want to go over it again, but it's worth thinking about. It's an easy trap to fall into and it gets a bit annoying for everyone after a while. Another problem is the predictability of feedback. So it's really easy to start with a student on the left and move to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And what happens then, of course, is the first one thinks this, and the last one thinks this. So it ends up being rather predictable and perhaps rather boring. We don't want this. Another problem that we have is this. We ask a question and the learner gives us the answer. We throw out another question to the class and we get another answer. We throw out another question to the class and we get the same learner answering all of the questions. This is what's called flying with the fastest. It's quite easy for this to happen because you'll often have one learner who's a bit more able or a bit more confident than the others, and it's easy to focus on them. So these are some of the practical problems. But actually one of the biggest problems I think of that scenario is that we're just not exploiting the activity to its full potential. There's a lot more we could get out of it. So let's have a look at some of those problems and try and give some answers or some help. This video was inspired by a talk that I went to at IATEFL this year by Silvana Richardson. So although a lot of these ideas are quite common, but this was the inspiration for the video, so thanks Silvana. Let's have a look at some ideas for varying feedback then. If you do things always the same way, it will be predictable and boring. So let's think about ways that we can vary it. One way is to increase people's confidence by giving them a chance to think about what they're going to say before they say it. It's worth considering that people are giving answers in a foreign language, and so they often do need a chance to think about stuff. Encouraging more pair work can really help to make sure that everyone's involved. So one idea is think, pair, share. When you ask a question or when you give an activity, give them some time to think and let them share together with their partner before you get feedback on it. This will probably encourage more people to be involved. Another idea is to pose a question and then pause, give them a minute to think, then pounce on somebody. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? And then get them to ask a follow-up question to somebody else to bounce it. Other ideas for varying feedback are giving them a key. So you don't always have to be the person who gives all the answers in the classroom. Sometimes giving a key can be more efficient and encourage autonomy, so that's good. I think there's a but here, and that's that you need to remember you're the teacher. So just handing out answer keys isn't really teaching. Sometimes it'll be useful if the answers are, if it's a fairly standard sort of exercise, but you might want to think about how you're going to exploit that key and maybe get them think about why the answers are right as well. Another idea for varying feedback is to think about how you can avoid flying with the fastest. Now, there are a few ways to do this, and we've kind of looked at a few of them a bit already with the think, pair, share idea, for example. But it's worth remembering that if you ask the class as a whole, then what will happen is that your most confident learner is going to end up dominating. Even if you nominate, you might have a particular bent for the left-hand side of the room or the right-hand side of the room or the front or the back or the girls or the boys. You might not be aware of it, but this is entirely possible. What you want to try to do is to get everybody to contribute. And here are some ways that you can do this. Sort of leads on, I suppose, from the think, pair, share idea is you can give them mini whiteboards in pairs or in groups per table, something like that. These are really cheap online, and it's a really nice idea to get learners to write feedback down, and then everybody can hold it up and you can see what they've got. If you don't want to buy mini whiteboards, you can use just Polly Pockets with a white piece of paper inside and write on them with whiteboard markers. That works too. You might want to give people voting cards, just yes, no, or you can just do this with hand gestures as well. That works quite perfectly. Or you can use post-it notes. Get individuals to write their answers on post-it notes and come and stick them up somewhere, or share them on a table. All of these ideas will encourage more people to contribute to feedback. If you're a bit more techie, then you might want to use something like Socrative or Kahoot. People can vote on their phones, so you can do feedback that way. I think you have to be a little bit careful with this if you're doing it individually, because I think the competition can become a bit too intense, and people can end up losing. But you might want to do it in groups, and that works well. I think the other thing to think about is making feedback more useful. So if you've got an activity, what you want is to make the most of it, not just to give them the answers, but to think about what else you can get from that activity. One thing to really think about is exploiting the lexis that's in a particular gap fill or in a particular true-false question or whatever else it is. There's going to be good lexis that you can use, also phrases and collocations. This might be things that they understand receptively but maybe wouldn't use productively. It's good to exploit this to draw their attention to these things, make them notice them. And ask follow-up questions. So rather than just asking, did she go out? Yes, good. Think about other things that you could ask which will extend their answers and give them a chance to speak more, particularly in pairs. I hope that some of this short video has been useful and has given you a few thoughts about feedback. It's an important part of the lesson, and it's worth considering how you can vary it to make it more interesting and exploit the material to make it the most useful that it can be for your learners. See you again. Thanks very much. Bye bye.